Note that the term second language acquisition is in debate, as in second can be inferred second in proficiency, which is problematic for those who speak the national dominant language as a second language or speak several languages with high proficiency. A better term is additional language. Children appear to learn new skills rapidly and to build sentences they have not yet even heard. But with respect to language acquisition, perhaps the focus of this question is whether or not child learners acquire a new language system with higher proficiency than adult learners. The issue for linguists, then, is to define these periods of language acquisition, to define the settings proficiency occurs in, and to interpret the age-related effects. My position in February of this year was that children are better language learners than adults. My position now in May has changed. My initial impression was that because children amaze us at how much they can absorb and pick up in naturally occurring settings, in which there is not any real explicit teaching, that it could be argued that their language acquisition should be better than adults. Another good argument for me was that people I know who have a second childhood language sound closer to it than adult learners of that same language. Thirdly, Macquarie University's psycholinguistics unit, I had learnt all about brain plasticity and the implications of it in children versus adults. Penfield and Roberts, for example, argued for an optimum period for language acquisition that falls within the first 10 years of life. Cases observed directly argued for the possibility of plasticity change in the left hemisphere of children, but not adults. However, as good as this rationale sounds, what indicated to me I was wrong was the emergent data available in the field of SLA research, which, as I will demonstrate, show that adult learners have a higher rate of learning, particularly in grammar, with the caveat that children will overtake adult learners where they have sustained exposure to the language over a greater period of life. This is less likely to occur in instructional settings, that is, in the classroom, than in naturally occurring settings. But a critical amount of exposure to the target language is not available in the classroom setting. And as most language learning occurs in this setting, it is possible to conclude that adult learners have an advantage initially where rate of learning is concerned. This study supports this prominently, a longitudinal study on adult and child groups learning Dutch over 10 months. Although children lagged on grammar, they began to catch up. In this study of both explicit and implicit instruction in the classroom, learners of ages 8, 11 and 14, with controls for external exposure to target language, conducted in a longitudinal study over 726 hours of class time, scored oldest to youngest, fastest to slowest. In a survey of the literature, Singlton found no consensus on this period of acquisition among linguists. Moreover, it seems there are differences based on which feature of language is concerned. The endpoint seems to come earlier for pronunciation than for grammar, for example. And this study was conducted in the same way on French learners. It looked at primary school versus secondary school learners. The truth is, the level of acquisition cannot be observed directly, and so inferences must be made based on performance. One approach sees a learner has successfully acquired a feature when it has been used for the first time. However, others see it as a level of accuracy taken over a period of time. Olson and Samuel's study in crash course learning German pronunciation in brief 15 to 25-minute lessons, adults significantly outperformed children. More studies confirm these results. Here, 54 Japanese children were pitted against 24 Japanese adults in instruction on phonemes U and R. Children's performance was ahead until instruction became explicit. The class was given explicit instruction in phonemics, and from this stage, the adults again performed better. Studies that judge immersive acquisition based on grammar proficiency show the complex nature of understanding acquisition, and leave room to explore other independent variables of competence. This study suggests that it is the learner's ability to participate that leads to successful acquisition, in this case of phrases that would help them to get access to the input, imitate and understand it from contextual clues, and then use it in creative ways. And this study provides evidence of an adult who showed very little acquisition and who remained in closer contact with his immigrant worker community than the target language community. And finally, this study provides evidence of an adult who showed very little acquisition, though who mixed with target language speakers. It breaks down defining acquisition through immersion into types other than just linguistic competence. That is, the adult progressed considerably in sociolinguistic, discursive, and strategic competency. He could use it in appropriate ways, participate in coherent and cohesive conversations, and deal with breakdowns. So, although there is variance in our own definitions of learner competence, Surveys of the literature like these indicate greater performance in adults for additional language acquisition. It is important to remember it is a social environmental factor. These studies have not expressed biological standpoints, such as the classroom setting factor we've all experienced, that make this possible to conclude.